I wasn't watching Game of Thrones as it aired, and by the time I had the money for HBO, I had long decided I wasn't interested in it. So when a friend strongly urged me to watch House of the Dragon, I was a bit skeptical, but I took him up on it, and now I eagerly await season 3. One thing that caught my eye was that as the battle lines were drawn between the Greens and the Blacks, Alicent Hightower quickly became my favorite character in the entire show. We see that she is capable of compassion and fairness that one might expect from a person of her station, but she's also ruthless in her pursuit of power. And those three qualities are sometimes difficult to tell apart, especially with how she treats her sons and other folks around the Red Keep. Much of Alicent's actions border on or are outright abuse, and with how she's written, both her rise to power and her eventual fall, she shows the complex ways people in abusive relationships mold themselves after their abusers, like she did with her father, justify their actions, hate themselves and the abusers for it, and even how they claw themselves out of it. All of this makes for a really interesting case study in how to write flawed but still sympathetic characters. I want to start this off by saying that Alicent is unlike anybody else in the show in that she did not choose power, but power, and by extension the men around her, chose her. Her father chose to bring her to the Red Keep, and when the time arose, chose to position her in such a way where Viserys would remarry her, which he does, after which she is expected only to produce male heirs and is maritally raped to do so. At no point in Alicent's rise to power does she ever get a say in her position, and this makes her very easy to sympathize with, as she's treated as property by all the men in her life. She only has Rhaenyra to treat her with any level of respect or autonomy, and by episode 5, she loses that too. Her choosing to wear the green dress, the call to arms, is her finally standing up for herself, because she's finally realized that nobody else will. At this point, she is no longer passive in her own story, but active in carving out her own place. It is this moment where she begins to play the Game of Thrones. And throughout the show, she plays in such a way that she tries to balance standing up for her children with the necessary ruthlessness that comes with royal court, and I think she balances this quite well. She comforts Diana after Aegon rapes her, and then she rightfully berates him. She extends offerings of peace to Rhaenyra to avoid war, despite everyone in the small council wanting to kill Rhaenyra outright, and the one instance where she really goes overboard, in season 1 at least, is when she tries to take Lucerys' eye. It's an insane request, but considering the circumstances, she is justified in feeling that way, but nobody in the room really considers her position. Alicent plays this balancing act because she's been on the receiving end of power her whole life, and tries to afford a level of compassion the others wouldn't. But this doesn't make her immune to the abuses she's suffered. In the course of comforting Diana, she is also covering up Aegon's actions, because that would also threaten her power as queen. And then she later uses her position as Queen Regent to further her family's claims, and she rather opportunistically takes Viserys' bedridden mutters of Aegon the Conqueror as a change of mind. We as the audience know it's not, but neither she or anybody else know that, and that confusion allows her to seize more power. Much of her arc throughout season 2 is her coming to realize the ways in which she has become exactly like the people who manipulated her, and this helps to rebuild any sympathy she may have lost during season 1. And it's that willingness to sit back and consider maybe she was wrong to do what she did that makes her so compelling, because that's a rarity, especially in real life. Alicent and Rhaenyra's character arcs parallel each other in a lot of ways. They are both thrusted into power by their fathers, their councils consistently undermine their authority, the war is being fought for their respective sons' claims, not their own, and their shared hobby of getting laid is the only way for either of them to express personal autonomy. They are both trapped in the chains of their station and do what they can to create autonomy for themselves. But what separates them is that Rhaenyra gets to see her possible futures in both Rhaenys, who has all the freedom she wants, and Aemma, who dies in childbirth trying to produce a male heir, and models herself after the former. Alicent gets neither of these women to guide her, and thus models herself after the people who manipulated her, which temporarily empowers her in court, but is gradually stripped of that power once her usefulness is fulfilled. Amidst this situation, there's only two ways she can really express autonomy. The first is by protecting her kids, who she comes to recognize as monsters, but still loves them in a strange way only a mother could. And even then, she has her doubts. She sees Aemond as ruthless in his pursuit of the throne, not unlike Daemon, and she comes to recognize Aegon as nothing more than an entitled brat whose sole job is to sit the throne. The second way she expresses autonomy is by having sex, primarily with Criston Cole. It's easy to call this hypocritical given her attitudes towards extramarital sex in Season 1, but I see it more as her coming to understand Rhaenyra's position and why Rhaenyra was so carefree in regards to her position to begin with. Their positions are chains, and Alicent's attitude only tightened them. Once you understand Alicent's character arc as a struggle for agency, all of her actions make sense. Her hatred for Rhaenyra in Season 1 is a self-hatred for not having the same level of agency. She doesn't want to kill Rhaenyra in the countdown to war, not only because she still values their old friendship and believes it can be salvaged, but because Rhaenyra's mere existence as Queen Regent is a symbol of hope for Alicent that she may be able to escape. But once her fall is complete, she does the one thing left to her and surrenders, accepting her new position. This moment in time, her and Rhaenyra are in completely opposite positions than how they started. All of this together paints Alicent as a tragic figure. She is viewed as nothing more than a tool for attaining power by the men in her life and discarded when she is no longer useful. She believes that by playing the game and proving her worth, that she may earn an ounce of respect, and even then, nobody gives it to her. Every action she takes, she learned from the adults in her life, and so the only options she sees are the ones taught to her. Everything she does, she did not do with cruel intentions, but she chose to do them nonetheless. But conversely, it's all she knew, and so she perpetuates that cruelty. She's a product of her abusive environment, and that's exactly how real-world abuse works. A normal, healthy relationship will have both parties on equitable grounds, and there's a relatively free exchange of information, will, and consent. Abusive relationships will have the abuser mold the abused into their vision, with no consideration taken for what the abused wants. We see this happen to Alicent from episode 1 onwards, as her father positions her in such a way to consolidate power, and she slowly adopts the very tactics her father used against her and deploys them against her sons. Each individual action Alicent takes on their own is justifiable, but when taken together becomes inexcusable. From this perspective, it's very easy for the abuser to double down when confronted with the harm they've done. And we see this happen with Alicent early in Season 2, when Rhaenyra informs Alicent that Viserys' final words were not referring to her son Aegon, but of Aegon the Conqueror. Alicent initially rejects this news because at that moment her power is tied to Viserys' final words, or what she believes them to be. And to concede even the smallest mistake would be to relinquish that power. But once she is reminded of just how powerless she is within her own court, once her power is stripped from her, she is better suited to confront the reality that she was wrong and finally admit to it. By the end of Season 2, she hates who she has become and wants to be better. Come to Jesus moments can happen with abusers, but it's really dependent upon their situation, and Alicent's situation facilitated that. But the other part is that abusers have to be open to the idea that they're wrong, and Alicent also was. Now, Alicent's surrender may be a cynical play to retake her power, or she could be sincere in her surrender. Like with anybody who has done harm and claims to have changed, we have to wait and see. At time of writing, Season 3 is yet unreleased. Based on the promotional materials, we see that Rhaenyra is probably going to go mad with power, and I suspect that the writers will put Alicent on an upward trajectory to make her more sympathetic, because up to this point, Rhaenyra has been the more likable of our two protagonists. I think it just makes sense from a narrative perspective as well to further highlight the differences and similarities between Alicent and Rhaenyra by putting them on opposing character arcs. Redemption arcs are commonplace throughout media, and one of the mistakes they typically make is equating redemption with absolution. Alicent's actions cannot be undone, but she can work against them, and it's going to be interesting to see if the writers can pull off redeeming her without absolving her, because that would make for a much more complex and interesting character than to just say that all of her bad actions are absolved because she said sorry. Because that's not really how any of this works.